Hello and welcome to this session. I am Clifton and I am joined by my colleagues Frederik and Gert, and together we're the Belgian Power Apps and Flow user group. We started this group in 2018 and we have grown to approximately 200 members. Our main goal is promoting the adoption of the Microsoft Power Platform. We are focused on the non-BI components of the Microsoft Power Platform and their interaction with the surrounding ecosystem. We organize events throughout the whole year. Sometimes we do it alone, and sometimes we work closely with other user groups and associations. You can find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you'd like to know more about us, please feel free to visit us on our website. So, today we are joined by an amazing fellow. He was one of the first Power Platform champions and current Microsoft Business Applications MVP. He's also one of the core contributors of the globally recognized Power Platform Adoption Framework. So let's now switch over to Keith Whatling to introduce himself and show what he's got in store for us today.
Hi everybody. I'm Keith Whatling, as you've just been told, and I want to talk about variables, right? I get in a pickle with variables because my apps normally have a whole host of variables inside them, and you can't really get to the nuts and bolts of a great user experience without variables. So I show you the under the covers of one of my apps, right? So, dear idea, that went completely wrong. Here we go. Right. So let me just get this awful bar out of the way. So I'll just show you under the covers of one of the apps. If I look at my variables tab here, you can see that I got a whole host of variables in screens, which means there's no way to sort them. I've got to search them. I've got to remember what they're called. I've got to drill in and find out where they are. And I'm going to get in a mess quite quickly. But that's not as bad a problem as some of the other pseudo variables inside of Power Apps. So if we think of a collection as a variable, as an array variable in any other programming language, I can't find those. So if I look at my collections and I have no way of discerning where this particular collection lives. I can't see all of those things. So I'm in a real pickle now because I'm using some of these variables for my settings. They're not just a data source sitting there somewhere. I'm now I need to know, I need to control where all of these things are. And that becomes a problem as your app starts to scale in complexity, as you start going from a good level of understanding of Power Apps to more advanced apps, more advanced user interfaces, and more advanced functionalities and formulas and all that kind of stuff. So how do you tame the beast, right? How do you understand how to do this? So let's just go right back to basics and look at the two variable types, right? So there are, there's two variable types. Well, actually kind of there's three, but we'll get to that in a minute, right? So two variable types. First variable type we'll look at is everyone's favorite, the set variable, right? Which is a global variable. The Power Platform coding standard says that they should be fixed with GLB or GBL. My preference is GBL, so I always do that. But I think it's because the B is under the G. So GBL, I'm going to show picture, right? And I'm gonna set that to true, okay? And I want another switch to turn that to false, right? I want another one over here. I'm going to say another little button, turn that to false. And everyone's done this, we've all kind of seen this kind of thing done, right? And I'll put that on the picture, okay? So we'll have that as GBL show picture, right? So I can show it, hide it, great. But that means that I've got the variable in two places. Let's make a switch, right? Let's make this not that thing, right? So let's make this not that variable. So when I click on the button now, it's a switch. It's going to turn it to the opposite thing because it's a Boolean value, and you can do all that kind of great stuff, right? Brilliant. But what happens next is where the problem lies. What happens when I need a variable for all of the user interface components on my screen? Let's say I've got 20 things I want to show and hide. That's now 20 variables. And you might think, Keith, I've got a really great idea, right? I'm going to use a collection to solve my problem. I'm going to store the state of everything that's in the screen in a collection. And you'd be right. That is a really good way of doing it. But you're going to come unstuck at some point because you'll be searching for IDs, and in collections you've got to manually type the ID. IntelliSense is not going to help you, right? And for that very reason, you then need another set of variables and potentially even more things on that list. So how do we get around that? So let's have a little look at one of my apps, right? So this is an app that I use to demo a lot, and it's a library. You can scan a book with a barcode, with a QR code, or the ISBN code on the back, and you can relate them to users, right? You can relate those to readers, and it uses the Common Data Service. And apologies to the SharePoint mob and the SQL mob out there, but I'm using CDS because it's like developing with Power Apps turned up to 11. And like, I'm going to encounter some problems, right? And one of the problems I'm going to encounter is that like this app has things inside of it like a menu, right? And that menu I've decided to store in a collection, which is not a bad thing to do. So I store that on app start. So I have my my collection here. Oh, actually, we will just collapse that. So I've got my collection here, yeah? So I'm saying, you know, clear collect, there's my menu items, and each one has a text name and a screen assigned to it. But that text name is a problem. If I turn around and say, do a lookup and say, is the you know, selected menu, whatever it is it add books, and I forget to capitalize books, or I put two O's in, or I put another space in, or I do something, I make a typo, that's not going to work. If I inadvertently nudge the code somewhere, if I put a space in when I'm coding, it's going to break my app. And because I can't see where my collections are, I don't know where it's broken. Like, so I've got to go on the hunt. I've got to go through everything, and I've got to remember where that is. And that's a massive problem, especially when you've built an app that's complicated and you come back 6 months later and someone wants an improvement, someone wants a bug fix, someone wants something changed, and you've got to pick it up and run with it. Now, the chances are you're going to do what everyone does, and instead of refactor code, they're going to write more code, because that's what coders do. And we are now coders, whether we like it or not. So my answer to that is to delve deeper into variables and ask variables, and the way that variables are displayed in Power Apps, in that sort of variables window where I can search and see stuff, to make variables my friend. And variables have got some really incredible things that are inside of them, that if you start to apply some of the other code from Power Apps to them, you can do some really great things. So what can variables store? So an easy way of figuring out what a variable can store is if you go and look at components, right? So if you go and look at a component and you click on the properties, the custom properties tab, and you just hit this data type, that there you can see all of the data types within Power Apps. Yes, there are a few more actually, but like all of the data types are there. You've also got option sets for CDS and a few other bits and pieces, but generally they're all there, right? That's your bread and butter data sets. So you can use all of those in your variables, just like you use them in your collections. So for example, in that collection, I'm using a screen, and you could use a screen. You could use a screen, set something in a variable to equal a screen. It could be text, numeric, all those kind of awesome, great things. But there's more to be done, right? So I'm going to kill this bit of code off and expand my set here, and you can see what I've got going on. So I have coded those names once and assigned them to variables. And instead of it being a single variable for each thing, I've put some curly braces around it. And that means that from my variable, when I go and look for it, I can now do things, as you can see below here in the collection for the menu items. I can say GBL global variable screen names dot add books, right? And the add books, when I kind of come into IntelliSense, it's going to help me out, right? I've got the new formula bar turned on here, but it's IntelliSense is going to help me out, right? And that's super powerful because I can see where these variables are, because I can go and look for them inside of my code through the direct, indirect, and declaration settings within inside the variable fields, right? So I can go and see where that variable is declared, what its uses are, and if there are any indirect uses, right? So that's very, very, very helpful. And then there's these other types of variables, these screen variables, or you could call them, some people call them context variables because they're declared with update context, but they are local to the screen. But they should not be referred to as local variables. They are in actual fact context variables because they exist within the context of the screen. For it to be a completely local variable, you'd have to do something else, and that something else we'll get to in a minute, I promise. How are we doing? Good. So I use variables to store a huge number of things, right? I use variables to store my screen options. So here you can see, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit just to make sure you can see. You can see I'm using this to store form mode. Now, form mode is a setting in Power Apps that's an enum, right, an enumerator. So these resolve to like 1, 2, 0, and in this case 4, because there is no form mode dot delete, right? So I made it, but I'm using what's inside Power Apps natively. And using some of those native functionalities can really help you later on, right? Like, so using those enums are always going to help you because you know they're always there and they're persistent, and you're always going to be good. They're also going to help you with your states for forms, so you can store those states in when you're building stuff. So that is really super cool and handy. But those enums could easily be text because it's going to compare the thing to the thing, right? It's going to compare what's on the left-hand side to what's on the right-hand side of any equal sign. So if I am coding and I want to say is equal to add books, I just say, like, is the thing that I'm comparing it to equal to GBL screen names dot add books, or is the current form mode equal to GBL options dot state dot edit, right? So I can get that out of Power Apps and inside of my bit of code that I'm writing, which is super cool. With the awesome new formula bar turned on, you can also do super cool things like this. So this is GBL, it's my colors, right? So I've got my kind of little color thing going on here, and you can see here it gives you the little kind of colors drop down kind of thing. But what I could do if I wanted to, if I've got that inside of a let's just put a button on the screen or a rectangle. Let's have a rectangle. Go and grab a rectangle. Stick one up here, right? And I say GBL colors, and I pull my little drop down there. Secondary, right? I'm hoping this is going to work on this screen. What is I've not got my, I've got it turned on. Ah, here we go. Right, so come on. Ah, it's gone. Right, that's a shame. Okay, all right, maybe we can't. Might be because we were in the wrong place. 1 minute. I'll try it over here. This worked last night. Problem with live demos. Here we go. GBL colors there, so I can drill into it and see what color I want to pick next. You know, and that helps me to reference back and understand what everything is while I'm building, while I'm going along. Right. So let's have a little bit of a deeper dive into now making some more complicated variables, right? So I've got a screen inside of my app called Manage Library, right? And one of the things I want to manage inside of my library is my readers. I might want to, it might be a GDPR thing. I want to delete a user. I want to edit a user, all that kind of thing, right? And I've tried to be cool, right? Try to be one of the cool kids. I have on my gallery. Let's zoom right in. I have in my gallery some controls on each tile, and I want to edit on the tile what I'm the details for that record, right? I don't want to pop up at this moment in time. This specific, as we imagine, is a specific use case where I actually want to do it locally on that line, right? So you would use this method for doing something like replicating an Excel workbook where you want to edit on the row. So I can kind of click on this and it's going to bring a pop-up up, right? And I got my pop-up and I can update, I can hide it, all that kind of stuff. But there's a variable for that, right? There's a local context variable, and we've called it lock because that's what the coding standards say that you should call it, is edit. And I've set that to true, and I've got one for delete. Lock is delete, true, so that's 2 variables. And I've got a whole bunch of other variables sitting around looking at stuff, right? And I want to try and narrow that down. I want to try and cut the number of variables on this screen to less. And to do that, I want to reuse them and I want to do more with them. So I actually have on this app a shield that sits on top of the record here, which kind of sets a little another little context variable, so that when this thing pops up, and if I look at my my little kind of my container that's sitting in, and I look at the invisible for the visible for it, I'm saying that, like, is it also the selected reader, right? Equals this item.reader, because I'm storing when they click that shield, I'm now saying, look, this thing equals this reader. I'm storing this item inside of that thing, so that shield is being triggered, and I think you can see the shield here, and that's what happens when you unselect it. So I'm saying update this reader. You can also, not with set variables, but with update context, you can update more than one variable at a time. So that's kind of handy, but it does mean now that I've got 2 variables, and we're trying to have less variables, right? We're trying to have something that's more reusable. So how do we go about doing that, right, without having too many? So if we have a little look at our variables list, we can see how many we've got, right? So manage library, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now I'm gonna jump over to a screen that I was working on, right? I'm refactoring my code. I'm not writing more code. I'm refactoring my code. I've got exactly the same thing here, and to make this more reusable, I'm thinking, well, like, I know what users are like. Someone in HR has said that they want to be able to edit the record on the tile, and someone else has said, oh, I want it to be a pop-up. And then there's we've got to make it accessible as well, and it might be a bit too small for some people to access on the tile. So I might have to have a slightly different user interface. So I need to build some flexibility into my app, and I can do some of that up front with variables, right? So now when I hit edit, I've got a whole bunch of stuff. Now this is where we need to pay attention. So I have my variable, my local context variable name, right? So this is my screen variable name, and then I open up another set of curly braces because I'm passing in multiple values, right? And that means that this variable is going to appear in the variables explorer here as a record, as a little I call that the sort of radiator, the car grille. So if I click on that, I can see inside of the record, and I can see what sort of things it's expecting to show. At the moment, there is no record. Show is set to false, and the type is set to 0. And you can see I'm using my options that I created on the on app start, right? I've got gbl.states.edit in there because I'm going to reuse that so that I'm not using text, right? I don't want to be typing in. I don't want to be making typographical errors, capitalization, all that kind of stuff. I want IntelliSense to do the work for me. I want it to do the typing for me. I want to be able to press 3 keys and a couple of tabs here rather than having to remember what everything is. And then I'm calling, so I was saying, right, the type is options, states, edit. Okay, good. So that's going to put it in edit mode. And then I've got a record, which is going to be this item. So I'm lifting this item out. So I can now do comparisons and say, hey, is this thing this item? And the reason why we need to do that, by the way, is if we were using this, if I kind of like click on here and I haven't got, oh, sorry, I must have delete that last night. Sorry, when I was practicing rehearsals. When I click on that and I click on another record, it would show it on all of the gallery records inside of my gallery. And I don't want to do that. I want it to be specific. So I want to say, is it equal to the selected item, right? So and then change it if it's not. So let's just hide you. And then I'm saying, like, just a simple Boolean, true, false. So I can now use on that on the container here. I can use where we go lock edit reader dot show, right? So it's super powerful, right? Like I've managed to use one variable multiple times, and you can see here, like I've used that variable, and I'm saying, look, is this thing selected, and is this item dot reader, right, that GUID, equal to lock edit reader dot record dot reader? Okay, good, it is, yeah. And what's the reader type? Is it equal to edit? Right, okay, good. And what's the show thing? And if all of these are true, I'm going to display it on the screen, and that's going to make sure that everything works as I want it to do. The nice bit about this now is that to do the delete method, all I'm doing is I'm just changing that type to delete, and I can pretty much copy and paste the whole thing over and just change the states to respond to delete. So when I hit the delete button, I've got another pop-up that comes up, same kind of thing, and I've got all of my variables in. Oh dear, visible is true. That's the wrong thing. I want that one. I got all my variables in there, and all I've had to do as a user to recreate the appearance on the screen and all of the logic behind it is just change that one variable in one place. It's all linked together. So now I'm controlling all of those things from my my one app. Now, if I wanted to, and if I wanted to go totally nuts, I could reuse that variable again. And this is where I kind of err on the side of caution, because this is pretty much linked to this gallery. And I would probably in the real world create one for the other gallery, for the books gallery. But I could, if I wanted to, have that record being changing that to record reader and record book, and put a type in there to say that this is a book type and this is a reader type, and have the two. But then I wouldn't be able to have two things display on the screen at one time. I wouldn't be able to do one reader and a book concurrently, so you'd want to split them. So you've got to have a little bit of a think through about how you use this, where you use this, and why you'd use this. And it will really work for you, and it will really help you build more complicated apps. Part of the reason being will be, because as you see from the variable screen, now things are a lot cleaner. We've gone from having 4 variables to having 2 variables. One I need, which is I want to reset everything on the screen when the screen shows. I'm not going to change that at the moment, but I could build some other screen level events into that reset and then call it, like, I don't know, lock screen show or something, which will be that screen event. And build that out and kind of delve into it. But you will find that, like, you know, this was an app that I built before I really got into trimming my variables down and doing it this way. Now, some good practice. I find, and there's one problem with this method. Sorry, I should tell you about the problem before we talk about the best practice. There is one problem with this method, and that is you have to be fairly certain what you want to put in the variable before you put it in, right? Because if I start adding additional fields, so let's say I want to put in some more stuff over here, I can do that, but I'm going to mess it up somewhere else, right? And if I omit something, then it doesn't keep the current state, okay? If I omit something, it's going to just blank it out. It's going to be, there's nothing in there because I'm rewriting the whole variable every time. It doesn't just tweak the bits that I allow. It's going to, like, just completely miss that thing out and there'll be nothing in there. And that can be great. And you can get away with that until you get some expected errant behavior. So every time you declare this thing, you're going to have to redeclare those other states, right? So to do that, you would do something along the lines of lock edit reader, and then you pop that in there, and it would be dot reader, dot record, sorry. And that's going to keep the variable consistent from one implementation to the other. So say I want to change one value and keep the others the same, but I want to maintain their state, I have to declare that every time. Now, it's a smaller price to pay than having 100 variables and not being able to keep track of them. So this does help you to understand where your app is moving around. Now, you can store records inside of a variable like a collection, but don't do that. Store them as a collection and keep the, if you're doing something with menu items and all that kind of stuff, make a key that is for those settings inside of your collection that is referred to via a variable that you create and maintain at the very beginning, at the very top level of the app, because you're going to buy yourself a huge amount of time going forward as you kind of progress along your journey, right? So that is, these work for context variables, and it's exactly the same pattern works for set variables, but they're declared ever so slightly differently. And I'm just going to declare one in a come here, mouse. I'm just going to declare one in a button on the screen. So we just pop a button on there. Yeah, please wait. That's never good when it does that. Lord alone knows what's going to happen now. Oh dear. Right, let me try it in this one. So I'm gonna whack this in here, right? So I've just got a so on a set variable, I don't need the double curly braces at the end. So I could say time. Sorry, my mistake. Open and close. Time is now. And food is chocolate, something like that, right? You can see, bad example, but I only have one curly brace on the end rather than two, so I can better define all that kind of stuff. And it's giving me an error because it's different from somewhere else in the app. Okay, so And that's a really good example of one of the things it does to help you is it turns around and says, hey, this is of a different type. So it expects to see all of those fields. So let's have a look at the third variable type, the third super secret variable type that is the thing that I use the most in the whole wide world, right? Like I never stop using this function. I find it very difficult to do anything complicated these days without reverting to it because of how it simplifies absolutely everything I do, right? And that is the magical with function, right? With is just amazing. With can do so many things for you. So let's just have a look at where, right? Now, here's an horrible bit of code, right? This to a user, to an end user, someone's going to look at this and go, good God, what does that mean, right? And there are things in here that are repeated, like lat text and long text are repeated. And that's really not going to help me to, like, why am I referring to stuff twice? And, you know, if you ever did Excel VBA and all that kind of stuff, there was that rule that, like, if you referred to it twice, it should be a variable, right? And you'll find that, I think, in a lot of programming languages. You use it more than once, it's a variable, right? So let's use with to make this better. As I've got the old formula bar here, so I'm jumping between formula bars, right? So with creates super local variables, right? And they can be used to get yourself out of jail in a jiffy. So I might want to say, like, so we'll just have lat, and I'm going to grab that lat text and put that there. And I'm just going to replace everywhere it says lat with that. Okay, and then I'm going to do long. And I'm going to grab long text, and I'm going to put that there, and I'm going to replace long. And I've been dying to do this all day, right? I can't tell you how much I've been dying to do this all day. I would normally, in the old way, have image height or something like that, but no longer do I need to do that, boys and girls, because I can use self, right? And I'm going to refer to itself. So this is referring to the control itself. So now all I need to do, well, I've got my slider value for my zoom. So I suppose I could say like zoom level. I can put my slider value in there. Zoom level. So now when I go to reuse this piece of code, and indeed, like, I am comfortable with this piece of code, I wrote this piece of code, but someone else may not be comfortable. Someone might be, you know, starting off in Power Apps and they really want to use this thing. This means that I've managed to abstract all of this complexity at the bottom of the piece of code and lob it at the top, right? And I could put some nice comments in here and explain exactly what this thing is without putting it in this mess of squirrely whirly code underneath. I mean, it's ugly. Why would you want to do it? Yet the results are exactly the same, right? Like, it's exactly the same function, but 100 times easier to read. And these are indeed super local variables that are only persist inside the with function. Now, you're thinking, okay, all right, like, that's great, but what's it really going to do for me? How many times have you had to make a variable to get around a delegation problem with a data source, right? Like, say you've got today plus 1, yeah, or today plus some date times and all the rest of it, and for whatever reason it doesn't delegate to your data source. You can write that formula at the top and use it underneath in your function, right? So with can do a whole bunch of stuff to help you out there. In fact, I've used with to do some pretty funky things and some quite exciting things. So for years, I really had this problem with the Common Data Service, and that was, how do I patch a hierarchy, right? It's a common thing to try and do when you're playing with a relational database, where I want to patch a parent to a child, a parent to a child, and a parent to a child, or a child to a parent, a child to a parent, a child to a parent. And to do that, you used to do it this way, right? So, really, right, we're going to have to reopen this one. I do apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just shut that one down and go again. So you'd have to create a number of variables. So you would patch the first record, you would store that patch in a variable, then you would patch the second record, you would store that patch in the second variable, and then you would finally create your last step, your last patch, right? So on the screen in front of you, there we go. Yeah, they all seem to be hidden for some reason. How did I manage to do that? Oh. Right, and one more. On the screen in front of you. There's why. Right, so I've got like this is the and I can say the UG, do apologize if I spelled anything wrong because I'm dyslexic. Yeah, I have. Right, so I have got the first method of doing things, which is with update context, right? So I am patching the first record. So I've got 3 data sources in the Common Data Service. I've got with record 1, with record 2, and with record 3. And with record 2 is related to with record 1. So that is the many to one relationship between 2 and 1. And then there is another many to one relationship between 3 and 2. And I want to create a hierarchy between those 3 records. Okay, so I want to say, right, I'm going to create the first record and I'm going to patch that first record. I'm going to patch that first record. Patch spits out the record that it writes, in case you didn't know. Patch spits out the record that it writes. And that lock record 1 is going to be used again to hand to record 1 with inside with records 2. The result in patch is going to be loaded into variable lock record 2, and that's going to be passed again to a third. And you don't need the update context here, but most people store the result in a variable as lock record 3, right? So that's 3 variables. Okay, so let's do this the mad way first. Now, this didn't used to work, but it does since with the new CDS connector, right? And that is this, and I do apologize for this right in advance. This is the crazy way of doing it, and this is what I like to call patching a patch in a patch, right? So I am patching the first record and handing it directly to record 1 on the second record, and I'm patching that and handing it directly to record 2 on the third record. So I have a nested patch. Okay, patch in a patch in a patch. So just to demonstrate that works, and it did work last night. I'm really hoping it's going to work today because you know what it's like live demoing these things often don't. I refresh my data sources, all 3 of them, and I think this is the Belgium UG, right? And patch in a patch in a patch worked. Problem is, it is very unreadable and like how am I going to explain this inside out nature to anybody, right? It's not fun. It's the same number of API calls. It's 3 API calls, right? And I'm not getting anything out of it at the end. I mean, I could store the whole lot in a variable, but there you go. But there is another way with, and this is with, okay? So I have my first with statement. So my first with statement, I'm storing the first patch in record 1 within a with, okay? And then the body of that with is another with, okay? And the top part where I store the local variable of the second with, I'm patching that record, patching that second record. So I'm making that command and I'm storing that record. And then I'm coming down and I'm making my third call and using the record from record 2. Now, what's awesome about this particular method is if I wanted to create, and as you often have to when you're making, when you're doing CDS and SharePoint and SQL with Power Apps, you're not always going to get back that the full stack, right? You're only going to get one level of hierarchy in either direction with CDS, right? So I'm only going to get the parent or the children back. I'm not going to get the parent of the parent. So from record 3, I can't get to record 1 because CDS doesn't support me walking across end-to-end relationships, right? It supports me walking one level, but not many levels, right? Not n levels, only one level. And what this gives me is record 1 is still within the context of the with. So I can use record 1 right the way inside of the nested withs. And you can make these quite complicated. Brian Dang and I and a few of the others on the internet were on Twitter, were joking that like nowadays complicated Power Apps formulas basically just say with because it's so much better than going in and out. One of the other things that this saves you from is state, right? And what the sort of the most evil formula I think in Power Apps is the for all loop, right? Everyone I know hates for all. Purely because of the disambiguation between what you're patching and what the record is. And if you've not seen disambiguation, I'm going to show you. So I have a screen, and inside of this app, I have this was a bus hires app, and so I've got hires and I've got buses, right? I've got a number of hires. N number of hires and N number of buses, and I want to use many buses on many hires, but from the bus side of things, I want to be able to see the hires. So I've got an N-to-N, many-to-many relationship between the two. Why would I want to do what I'm about to show you, right? So if I want to see those vehicles that are on those hires, very straightforward, right? Very straightforward. I can just say, selected hire dot buses, and it's going to return those to me. The problem is I don't then get that layer. I don't get anything else other than that single layer. I don't get the next layer down, and I can't go down from parent to child and then back up again to a parent and into another parent. It's impossible to do that. So I need to be able to capture the entirety of that child record, right? And to do that, I need to use a for loop, right? So I need to iterate over a collection. And I apologize that it's slightly curmudgeonly bit of code, but I've tried to keep it as absolutely simple as it is. And let's just expand it a little bit. So what am I doing, right? Before I did this, I had this kind of like, I'm clearing testing at the beginning, right? And I'm storing my temporary thing to iterate over. And I want to refer to that inside this collection, inside of my app, okay? Inside my for loop. So let's just style this out a little bit so you can all read it a little bit easier. I should have done this beforehand. I do apologise. 1, 2, and the with statement goes around there. Okay. Right. So were I trying to do this before, I would have had my disambiguator, and this is how you disambiguate in a for loop, right? So you have the name of the collection, open brackets, the @ symbol, and then you need single quotes if it's got a space in it, but otherwise not. And I'd put that here, okay? And when I run it, I get an error, and it would tell me that it's either not stable. It would tell me that it can't find it. It would tell me that I for whatever reason, it cannot get to this thing because it's getting confused somewhere inside of this collect. Exactly like if you have that problem with SharePoint with a delegated formula, or CDS if there's a delegation problem and you need to simplify that formula, right? Exactly the same problem, but this is much easier. This is just equals this thing. I know this thing's there, but it doesn't like it. And sometimes it will give you an error about consistency as well. It will tell you that this thing must be consistent across the for loop, and that's a real problem. So to get around that, I'm going to stick that in a GUID. And if I'd have put that, by the way, if I'd have put this here, the GUID, and I put that there, I believe I get a delegation error because it can't handle converting it to a GUID inside of the collect statement either, right? Even with the awesome power of CDS, with all the new CDS connector turned on, with the delegation and everything, with the new delegation for the in and all count ifs and everything turned on, it can't do that, right? So, but what I can do is use with and store that thing up here in the loop. So outside of the collect statement, I'm going to store that at the top, and I can and to do that, it enables me to get out of jail, right? Oh, enables me. Okay, stop typing. It enables me to get out of jail, and therefore my formula works. There's no delegation issue. There's no errors. There's no nothing. So I just boom, click on it, and Bob's your uncle. Were I trying to do it the other way, I'll show you what happens. If I do it this way, I'm going to get a red. There we go. There go the thinking dots, and we're off to the races, ladies and gentlemen. There goes thinking dot number 1, followed by thinking dot number 2, and thinking dot number 3, bringing up the rear, and thinking dot number 3 is going to win, and nothing's going to happen, and it's still doing it. And I've got an error come back, which has said object reference not set of an instance to an object. Now I think that's something to do with many to many, and not. It may be better with many to one, but it just doesn't like it. But I tried using trusty old faithful with to simplify everything down, and if I kind of let's try it without the disambiguation, you might see what happens here. And there we go. Here's another error, and it's saying, and this is one of the common ones you see. It's just it's not going to let me zoom in on that error. I don't think. It doesn't make the error any bigger. It still keeps it small. It says here the right side of the equals operator must be a consistent value, right? And it doesn't like that it's getting confused between these two things. So I would use the disambiguation, but the disambiguation didn't work. So therefore I have to use a with to simplify out the formula with these micro macro variables. And that everybody, is it? I hope that was good for you. I hope you got anything out of it. I've left a few minutes at the end for some questions. So go for broke. I'm going to switch over to the Teams window now and see if anyone's got anything they want to ask.
Okay, thanks, Keith. That was a very amazing session. We do have a question. Actually, one of our attendees asked if you could elaborate on the difference between update context and set. Yeah, so let me share my screen because it's easier to talk about it that way. So the difference between update context and set is that a set variable, I hate them being called set variables, right? But a set variable
lives in a global variable, right? It's globally referenceable from any screen, which means that I can take it from one screen to the next. So I invariably use them when I want to pass data from one screen to the next. And there's a reason for that, right? There is a sort of maybe a fourth variable type, and I really hate it with a passion. And that is on navigate, right? So I can create a context variable in another screen. Let me just grab a button and show you why it's so super important, right? So if I navigate to, let's say, the, I don't know, documentation screen, right? And I've got some sort of awful screen transition. I can pass in, it says, look, context at the end there, in the IntelliSense at the top in the help, I can pass in variables, right? And if I had a variable on this side of the screen, let's say I had like, so this is what I'm passing in. So I could say like lock temp, right? To, and I can pass a variable in here that would be like, for example, true, okay? But this is really slow, and you won't necessarily see it in the maker, and they may have done some brilliant performance improvement, and I might look like a complete ass. But there used to be a big time lag if you passed variables from one screen to the next, right? They may have changed that, but I stopped doing it in its entirety and started using global variables. Now, what was really crazy, okay, so that's my navigate button, right? Nav. If I have another button and I create a variable on this side of the loop, I can pass in that variable to the nav. You see, one's colored because it's recognized it as a variable, and the other one, it's a key, right? So key value, key value, key value. The value is the variable, but the key is lock temp. And if I go to the documentation screen and I look at, let's say, the variables here, you can see I have this lock temp variable, but at no point do I declare it on this screen. Yeah, so that's the only way of passing variables from one screen to the next is by doing that. But the performance hit is quite high. And I never forget, I put it in, I used it in the maker, it was fine, like everything was dandy. I got to the user, I clicked on the button and I was like, oh, I clicked again. Oh, right, now it did it. And it just took so long to actually navigate because it was trying to figure out what to pass and how to pass it. And what I'd done as well is I was passing many variables across. But in actual fact, I was only passing like 3 variables of Boolean type. So data size, it should have been tiny. I don't know, maybe there's been some awesome performance improvement on that. I know they were doing a lot of work on making Power Apps, the player, better. So basically, global variables are a set variable, global variable are available globally everywhere in the app. So you use that for your settings, like the user picture, the date language, like my name, my email, that kind of thing. And local variables are locally within the screen. They do come across where you copy and paste stuff. So for example, if you've got a debug button and a debug panel, you can copy and paste them from one screen to the next. So you may find you've got lock is debug on all of your screens, you know, and you'd expect to see that on all of your screens. So I hope that clarifies that for you.
So yes, it certainly does. I see that we do not have any more questions. Maybe Frederick, you have something to add?
Not for the moment. It was all clear for me and it was a very nice presentation, Keith. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure, man. Anytime.
Okay, Keith, do you have something else to add? Maybe like a how do they say it, like a sort of outro, or should I say a best practice tip?
I can show you my secret hack if you want.
Okay.
So, you know, in Power Apps, it does all this horrible snapping. Yeah. If you click on what you want to drag and hold down Alt to go into preview mode, you can move it anywhere you like. Ah, no snapping. See, little trick there. So if you're ever struggling to position stuff on screen, that's my little hack. In terms of best practice, yeah, I mean, look, you've got to think about future you all the time. You've got to think about other people. So when it comes to those best practices around variables, you want to make sure you're documenting stuff. Like I have a habit of declaring the local variables at the somewhere in that screen, writing them all in there, and like writing a big kind of, like if I put a variable in a screen, for example, let's go to a variable with a screen. So here's a good one. Like, here's a perfectly good example, right? So we'll do it this way. So if I do like a crazy kind of like thing with loads of like stars and all that kind of shenanigans, I'm always going to know that that's where my variable explanation is, because I don't want to necessarily write those descriptions of what everything is over and over again. So when I go and search for which one was that I was doing, show picture, right, hang on one second, variables, show picture. Now I can see, like, if I see that big blurb there, and I'd probably put like variable descriptions or something like that inside of that screen, I would know that that's where all of that stuff was. It's a bit hacky, but it's the best we can do for now within Power Platform until we get some more governance tools and ALM and all that kind of shenanigans. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. So Keith, and thank you for this session. I still have something to share with the audience. Yes, as I already said, so thank you, Keith, for this session. It was a very great session, and for those who miss parts of this session, don't worry, as this will be made available through our resource channels. What I also want to make clear, we have our upcoming session next. I think it's 4th of June, if I'm correct. And that will be with Eva. So it will be at the same time, same place. So be sure to tune in. Registration information will be made available shortly. So I would say, once again, we thank you for attending and say until the next time. And once again, thank you, Keith. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks very much for having me, guys.
Yes, thanks. Bye-bye. Until next time.
Bye.